Welcome to HIListically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo, certified holistic health coach and health and wellness journalist. This is an empowering place to explore self-awareness, self-love, and transformation through health, healing, and humor. By sharing life-changing experiences, knowledge, and guests with varied expertise, we'll explore who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm glad you're here. There are times in our lives when we meet people we just know are going to stick around for the long run. Who is that person, or who are those people in your life? We're so lucky when we find them, right? My guest this week is the perfect example. I met Alan Seales about 20 years ago. We were young actors working together. Life happened and we went our separate ways. We both moved to New York City, but somehow the magic of that city, the Big Apple, has a way of connecting and reconnecting people. Fast forward a few years and I came to him with an idea. This podcast, heart-centered conversations about a topic that not enough people are talking about, and doing so by seeing the humor behind the healing. I've been there, he's been there, and he got it. He understood my mission because of his own struggles with mental health. And Alan was in before we even finished lunch. Alan is not only the producer of the HIListically Speaking podcast, he is also the co-founder and chief technology officer of the Broadway Podcast Network, the ultimate hub for theater and performing arts-inspired podcasts. On top of that, he's the executive producer and host of his own show, the Theater Podcast, where you'll hear intimate conversations with theater's biggest talents. And this isn't even his day job, folks. This podcast junkie is also global program manager for Google Talks. And let's not forget, he's a devoted dad and husband. So how does a guy like Alan find the balance, stay emotionally well, and still find the laughter behind his fast tech life? How does one face the demons and the demands and still thrive? You're about to find out on this episode of HIListically Speaking. Alan, you've been a part of this podcast since day one, and even before we actually went live and launched it. And you've been a huge part of this project and really believed in HIListically Speaking. So how can I not hold space for you? So what's new and good, my friend?
Oh, goodness. I am so glad to see this off the ground, I have to say, because we started working together on it about a year ago, right? It's been a while. And then life changes, life happens. So many things are different that, it's all on you to let people know about that. But I am just really happy, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you that this is out there in the world, because to be vulnerable, I've been finding, and this is part of why I want to say that I have stuck with this for so long and pushed you to get this out there and helped you start it in the first place, was just mental health. People's mental health journey, especially in this country, is just it's not good enough. It's people don't care about their mental quality as often as they should, or as well as they care about their bodies. And I think they need to care about their bodies and mental health equally well. So what you're doing, I believe, is it's a great service for so many people who need it. And I actually, literally not 10 minutes ago, before this interview, was just finishing up reading an article on CNN that says 1 in 4 young people now are thinking about suicide. And these are conversations we need to have. So I just want to thank you for doing what you do. Because it makes a difference.
I appreciate that. I acknowledge that, but I also appreciate all you're doing, because holding space for me and believing in my mission and the journey, and the only way out is through. So for both of us, we've both been on that transformation from trauma to triumph, which is the whole idea of HIListically Speaking. And it really kind of feeds into what you're doing as well. There's so many podcasts out there, and every single one of them has some importance to them and an audience. And, I think you and I just kind of jive, and we're kind of on the same page and align with each other, because even though your podcast, your the first podcast that you launched, which was the theater podcast, which we'll talk about, is really it's giving people a chance to tell their stories within the theater community. And we tend not to, we see the people on stage, we see them as actors, we see them in character, we see them in costumes, and you and I have been there. That's how we met, being in professional theater. We'll talk about that as well. But the whole idea of giving people a chance to just be themselves and be vulnerable and courageous, like you said, is so important. And it paves the way for people being able to know that they're not alone, you know?
Yeah. So like Wesley Taylor from most recently from, Indoor Boys is all over the internet, and most recently on Broadway in SpongeBob SquarePants. Like he talked about his own struggle with depression for the first time with me on the podcast. And the first time I talked about my own diagnosis publicly was with Patty Murin, who was talking about her own struggle with anxiety, like literally having panic attacks in the middle of being a Disney princess on stage 8 times a week. And Desi Oakley, who's gone out and just saved the day with Waitress months ago before that shut down, about like she's had these moments on stage where it's just her and she just breaks down and she has to cover her own fear on stage. And just Broadway star after star after star having the same story of imposter syndrome and anxiety and the struggle of maintaining the struggle of maintaining success, the pressure of being successful. And like, it's just these stories that I want to bring to the public eye, to let everybody know, especially now that it's so easy to connect with your favorite celebrity via social media, that at the most rudimentary level, everybody poops, right? You hear that same thing. But in the same respect, you might feel bad about yourself. You might feel down on one day. You might feel up on another day. And even the greatest people in the world still struggle with those challenges. And those are the stories. I want to humanize people and bring their stories to the world.
Well, part of that is because you can identify it and identify with it as well. When we are just who we are in the shell of who we are, and you're sitting across from someone that maybe they were a Broadway star, maybe they've won a Tony, maybe they have an Oscar, maybe they have a Drama Desk Award, whatever it is, or just been able to reach a height in their career that feels like such an accomplishment. It still boils down to, at the end of the day, you're going back to your home, you're opening the door, you've got your house or your apartment or your room, and you're still you. And sometimes we lose track of that when we talk to people or we see people on TV or on the stage, that it's important that we don't forget these are human beings with emotions and feelings and families and stories, and this is giving people the space to share that and be the authentic self they are. The rawness is so important and beautiful in the same right,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's my angle, I guess. If you wanted to say, like, what's your podcast about? What's the theater podcast about? It's just about Broadway and Broadway adjacent stars being themselves and and shedding aside, opening the door, showing a side of themselves that you normally don't get to see on stage. Because again, when especially that the month of May, when theater comes back and Tony nominations are out and everything happens at the beginning of June, that month of May, like, it's nonstop. They're going. It's Drama Desk here and Tony Press there and all this stuff. And they don't, like, the day of the Tonys, they wake up to do on that Sunday morning at 6 a.m., go do a final Tony rehearsal, and then go do their matinee, and that's their 8th show of the week, sometimes 9th, depending on what the show is. And then they have to go perform that night again on the Tonys, and then maybe win a Tony and go through that whole thing. And the amount of effort and physical stamina that these guys and girls must have, that they have. And I said this on the podcast too, that they are the Olympians of theater. Like, Broadway is the Olympians of theater. And they are just so tired at the end of this process. And a normal 8-show day is tiring enough, but then you add in your press stuff your press events. And I've gotten to be good friends with Kara Cooper and Jessica Rush, who are on Broadway, and they run a podcast called Mama's Talking Loud.
Oh, that's great.
And it's all about parents with like being a mom on Broadway, and Kara has a child with special needs. And so like she does 8 shows a week and she has a child with special needs. And then I ran an audio session for them months ago with Haven Burton and Neely Bassman, and all of them, like they had children with special needs as well. And like the amount of emotion that just poured out of these women just to like find solace and comfort in each other and be able to share their stories. And I was talking with Jessica and Kara afterwards, and like this outpouring of support and emails and everything that came after those. It was like a 3-part episode because they just talked and talked and talked forever. They split it up into 3 hours. And after all the episodes came out, there were so many women that wrote in who were just saying, I can't believe I'm not alone. Thank you for sharing your story. Obviously, I'm not on Broadway, but being a mom with special needs, I felt horrible because my first reaction to seeing that my child had Down syndrome wasn't a positive one. Does that make me a bad mom? Just emotions and emotions and reactions all over the place. And it's so beautiful to see the people that you idolize on Broadway being able to share this truly intimate, vulnerable side of themselves in such a public way. To help others.
We're seeing so much of that now. You know, I think about what just recently happened, you know, with the loss of Nick and just Cordero, and like just how we're seeing the theater community, not even just the theater community, but just the community in general band together, that this was a family. This is a family, you know, a husband, a wife, and a son. There's so much more than their job. Honestly, we're all so much more than our job. Even if you're working at the sanitation department or, you know, Trader Joe's, or you're a star on Broadway or whatever, you are not your job. You are who you are first. And because you never know when, well, we've seen it. You never know when the job is going to end. And, you know, Broadway closes down, people are out of work. And more people are out of work. And that's where you really need to go within and do the solitude work and the work that builds you as the individual even more so, you know?
It's yes, I totally agree with that. And it's funny to me because there's so many people on Broadway now in the last like 2 to 3 years have just started opening up about just the fact that you're like, you need to go to a therapist. You need therapy should be mandated. Which I agree with. Or
some kind of therapeutic means.
Well, some other, yeah, like something. I mean,
yes.
Oh gosh, tangent. I was running a session for Girl Be Heard yesterday. They are like young women of color, like high school age, and they were just like the amount of awareness and the self-awareness that people have, the people of that age in general have now, but everything going on in the world, like they were basically talking about the fact that they're down with COVID's getting like I just said at the beginning of this, 1 in 4 young people are thinking about suicide now, right? Yeah. So they're talking about the fact that they're down and they can't afford right now to see their therapist. So they have to choose between putting a meal on the table and getting mental health. And it's just this weird, messed up system that we live in this country. But to your point earlier, Broadway, they are their jobs. The Broadway actors are their jobs. And it's one thing if you are like you're Patty Murin or Casey Levy and you're doing a Disney princess on stage from Frozen. And that's obviously like, it's not, I'll put in air quotes, real, right? Like you're playing a character who shoots ice out of your hands. It's not a real thing that can happen. You're not in Lion King, Scar dies every night and he doesn't go home and carry that burden with him because he's, a lion who died. but like Elizabeth Stanley in Jagged Little Pill. Did you get to see that before it closed? I mean,
No,
before Broadway shut down? No.
no.
Oh my gosh. So I won't
Is that the
spoil.
one you invited me to? Don't tell me that, because then that would really suck. If that was because
Probably.
once
I
in a
don't know.
while you invite me to a show with you, and I'm like, I can't make it, or it's always like last minute.
But yeah, so aside from just the music being great in general,
Yeah.
right? Completely remixed, remastered, Alanis Morissette music, which is just great in general.
Yeah.
But it's a completely unique original story wrapped in music that and the music actually is used to further the plot, and the whole story centers around Elizabeth Stanley and her character Elizabeth Healy, who is a sexual abuse survivor and addicted to opioids, and her journey every night 8 times a week just has to takes her to such a dark place. And when I interviewed her on my podcast, I said, like, how do you carry that home with you? How do you do you take a little bit of Mary Jane Healy? I don't know what I said. Yeah. Elizabeth Stanley plays Mary Jane Healy. So I said, do you take a little bit of Mary Jane home with you every night? And she goes, I can't. It would destroy me.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the show, even between scenes, sometimes she said, I go to the wings and I literally shake it out. I go and just shake it out and become Elizabeth again. She has to leave MJ on that stage.
You have to do that. And so here's a question for you. I mean, you and I met doing professional theater in North Carolina. And the minute you said that, I'm thinking of a part that I played where it was like really heavy. Have you ever had a part yourself that you've had that kind of moment?
I probably should have, but I don't think anything I did at the time I was emotionally ready to do.
Interesting.
So I wasn't good enough to take it to the place where it should have gone, which probably speaks to the fact that why I didn't, continue to, again, air quote, make it in the theater industry, because I think I took for granted what it takes to be authentic and real. I thought, the difference between acting and being, all the actors listening and be like, duh, you can act sad, but that doesn't work. You have to be sad. And you can tell the difference when you're watching somebody.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was a good actor, but I didn't have enough self-awareness to be a good beer, if that makes any sense. And I feel like now, if I had the time, which I, and you can make the time for anything. So this is obviously not high enough priority for me to make the time to do. But if I were thrust into a position where now at almost 40, where I had to go back and do the same roles I did earlier in my life, they'd be completely different.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Just because of the emotional awareness.
I think about that. I mean, the most pivotal role I think I ever was thrust into was playing Margot Frank, and I was playing a teenager who was like just Debbie Downer, and why wouldn't she be? She was stuck in a freaking attic with her sister and like a couple other people for 2.5 years, and she wasn't even the popular one. She was just the smart one. So I remember when I did that role of Margot in North Carolina, actually, going to the Holocaust Museum, trying to learn more about just, my roots, because, my mother's side is Jewish. So, and that affects everyone. You don't even have to be Jewish for the Holocaust to impact you. But that role did hit me pretty deeply. But I don't know if I've ever had anything else other than Margot Frank that's been as pivotal, except I will say when you and I did Fiddler together, that was a pretty emotional look. It's one of my favorite musicals of all times, but feeling, and I know you come from similar roots as well, like interfaith home, where you have that background. You're bound to feel something from it, because somewhere in your lineage, in your ancestry, someone was impacted by the pogroms. Someone had their home torn away from them. Somebody was annihilated somewhere. And it does go deep, even though we're singing mostly fun, happy songs, there's a part that there were some deeper songs in that show. course, you didn't get to sing because you were just sitting on a rooftop playing a fiddle.
I was about to say, yeah, I was about to say that show in particular was such a blur for me because I came in late. I was like a
Oh, you
replacement.
did?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
They couldn't find a fiddler. And I remember Casey Nicola, Tony
Right,
Award winning Casey
yeah,
Nicola
we were
was
so lucky to work with him.
our director. And
Yeah.
I remember going in and like I remember Wally Jones called me and he was like, "Hey, can you dance?" And I was like, "Sure I can. Yeah, sure." Because auditions were over.
Yeah.
And I didn't get cast as a singer. And so I went in and Casey had me do like a paddle turn. He's like, "All right, fine, get up on the roof," right? And
Didn't know that.
and I felt so out of place. I didn't have any character interaction with any of the other actors, so I didn't really get to know them. That was my first time ever performing with real actors from New York City. It was My Fair Lady first.
No, we did My Fair Lady first.
Oh,
that
right,
was
right.
that was our first professional show together.
Right,
I was thinking that today
Oh,
before.
gosh.
I'm like, wait, no, Fiddler wasn't our first. That was my first professional show.
Mine too, actually. Yeah, My Fair Lady. I was a little ensemble flower
Yeah, we were
seller.
like the London people.
Yeah. But I felt so out of place and just so like I guess isolated in that show, and that was my own fault. It was completely my own fault. And again, it was a lack of awareness. It was a lack of like absorbing and being what the fiddler was meant to represent. I was just more worried about getting my dance steps right.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, would do it completely differently now if I had the opportunity.
Even though what the fiddler represents is, really Tevye's, I mean, it wasn't like there was some guy in Anatevka that just hung out on the rooftops. Like the people really know the story. They understand that the fiddler does represent something that's part of Tevye's mindset.
Yeah.
His I guess, how would you define it? What he was truly representing was
it's tradition. It's his being able to let go of the past, and move on to adapt to the future.
Yeah. So some people who've never seen the show or have seen the movie and, might just be newer to the whole theatrical realm of things, might think that, oh, look, that town has a fiddler in it and he jumps from roof to roof. And no, he's not Bert in my Mary Poppins. He's not real, but he's real in Tevye's mind. And I thought it was a really incredible part. I liked you in it. I don't know if I realized that you came later. You kind of just fit into things. I mean, and I knew you, so I already had a relationship with you. But touching on that point about people who might not really be around theater, or like their first taste of theater might be they come to New York for a week-long trip or a long weekend from like Minnesota, and their first chance is to taste theater. What you and I talked about prior was that your show is like giving those people out in, say, the Midwest a chance to kind of really touch theater for the first time. And you actually had kind of like an avatar of who you're reaching. So elaborate on that.
Yeah. When I was starting the podcast, I heard some advice that still sticks with me in that, just picture your perfect listener and just make all your choices for that person. And because you're going to have the opportunities to change and adapt, and of course you should. But so my perfect listener, the person that I tell the stories for, is that closeted kid out in the Midwest who feels alone and isolated and bullied and has anxiety and maybe is a little bit depressed and isn't quite sure where they fit in, and finds a home through music and dance and artistic expression, and loves the Broadway stage, loves these stories, loves these songs. And exactly, I love that you asked me about this right now after talking about Fiddler, because how I felt during Fiddler, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm isolated, I'm alone, but I'm gonna fake it. I'm totally gonna fake it, and I'll just get through these 2 weeks of performances, and I'll be fine. Like, I didn't enjoy the moment. I wasn't in the moment. I didn't enjoy it in the moment, but the whole thing was that I thought that was the end all be all, that I just needed to start performing with these actors, that I just needed to start, like I had my foot in the door, and the next step was
Mhm.
Broadway, and the next step was this. And so in starting the podcast and in hearing the stories, the journeys of all of these people as they go from the lead in their small town in the middle of nowhere to coming to Broadway and never getting an audition the rest of their life, like it's expectation setting, it's learning, it's educating, it's getting the stories out so that you can hear that Wesley Taylor, again, booked a Broadway show 2 months after he moved to New York and thought he was the greatest shit, and then didn't work again for years because he had a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, it
Because
happens.
he thought that you just come in and you just get a job and then you're the best.
Mhm.
And so the what I'm trying to get across is just that there's so much success to be found, A, not on the Broadway stage, B, not on stage at all. You know, some of the greatest people that I interviewed, my most entertaining conversations have been the creatives, producers. Bernie Telsey from Telsey Casting, who's cast everything this side of Mississippi. Or, I don't know. That's a phrase I just made up. Bernie Telsey has cast literally everything lately, you know, Telsey and Co.
Yep.
And sitting down to talk to him, someone took a chance on him for Rent. Rent was the first thing he ever cast theatrically. And all of a sudden he just got known for thinking outside the box, because nobody wanted Rent at that time. They're like, a rock musical? Broadway doesn't do rock. That doesn't make sense. And now look what there is. And, you know, Hamilton, Broadway doesn't do hip hop, R&B. What's that? It's never going to be successful. And so, yeah, anyway, I guess my point being that I think back to myself, 22, 23-year-old Alan, sitting on that roof at Memorial Auditorium, the roof of those flimsy set pieces in the middle of made up Anatevka, and like I'm speaking to myself in these conversations I'm having with Broadway people, because these are the stories I would have wanted to hear, you know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Makes a difference.
Or more. Oh, huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, which is kind of why it's so beautiful to be able to hold space for people now, because here we are later, 20 years or so. And I think about that too. I'm like, where was this stuff when I needed the support? You know, there's just so much talk therapy you can really do. And I'm not poo-pooing psychotherapy or anything like that. Obviously, I work in the complementary alternative medicine and doing my own therapeutic means through havening and just being a holistic health coach. So I don't poo-poo it, but there's just so much we can do when we talk and we're in circles and circles and circles about the same upset in our lives. Like, we have to be able to have different therapeutic means of healing. And part of that is hearing other people's stories and knowing we're not alone in the battle, and knowing that there are other people out there going through different kinds of trials and tribulations and traumas and just upsets in their lives, and know that they're supported. So I get that. I wish I had that too. And how lucky we are to have the platform to be able to hold space for those to share their stories. And honestly, it's therapeutic for me too. I don't know about you, and I have a feeling it is, because we've talked about this, but this podcast, HIListically Speaking, is therapy for me. Even as someone in the healing arts or as a health journalist, it's healing for me to hear and hold space for others, and know that if you can just throw one starfish back into the ocean and make a difference, then you've made a difference to the ecosystem, even for that one starfish, you know? So it's a beautiful journey.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. 100% agree. And I started regularly doing therapy, seeing a therapist right at the same time that I started the podcast, because I was searching for something. I was looking for a connection that I didn't have. And I was looking to be better, but I didn't know what I was sick from. I didn't even realize I was sick, or that I wasn't where I should be. And, you know, my childhood, my whole life, and you know, I realized a lot of this through therapy, was that I was taught at a young age to just try to be better, to try to fix to try to eliminate the sickness and
Shit.
push it away.
Mhm.
And sometimes you just don't do that. Like being able now as who I am now, like 2 years later, 2.5 years later, just to sit, be able to like tell my wife or something, just, you know what? I need you to watch the kids. I just need to be sad right now. I need to sit with this. And before I would have been like, oh, screw it. I'll just, go out and ignore it. And then, a week later, I'll still feel bad and I won't realize why. I won't know what's going on. And so I started the podcast at the same time as doing therapy because I was looking for all of this. And immediately I was so reluctant to talk about myself. I just wanted to hear everybody else's story. And because I was like, why am I interesting? Nobody knows me. I don't have a bajillion Instagram followers. I don't matter. I'm just facilitating this conversation. And ironically, I started listening to Armchair Expert by Dax Shepard. It came out at that time as well. And I was analyzing him. I was like, why is he so good? Why is this so popular? And the first episode I ever listened to of his was when he interviewed Lena Hall. Sorry, not Lena Hall. Lena Dunham. I'm mixing my film and my Broadway.
From Girls.
Yeah, Lena Dunham.
Love her.
And she had trauma in her past that she's never talked about before, ever publicly. And it was because Dax is like, yeah, I was molested and I'm an AA and, I've been sober for 13 years and I have substance abuse problems. And he was just like laying it out there. Like, I've dealt with this. I've dealt with this. I've got these problems and I'm okay with it. I sit with this. And then Lena was like comfortable enough to open up too. And I realized, I said, holy shit, like this guy has to be vulnerable first with this somewhat relative stranger, and then somewhat relative stranger feels totally comfortable opening up with you again. And as soon as I made that connection, my conversations got infinitely better.
Oh, I totally agree with you, because even when we had our first conversation about wanting to do this podcast and I came to you with the idea, I knew I wanted it to be in the realm of like the mental health and help people, but it's grown so far. It's grown so much just in the year that I was building it, to the point where I'm like, oh, I need to re-record that one, because there's a part of me that wasn't maybe fully present early on, because I was like, I don't know if I want to talk about that yet, and being someone who's a emotional health practitioner and working in mental health, we have to be real, but it's not really supposed to be about us. We're holding space for someone else. But what I've noticed just with my own clients is that they want to know that that we've been through the crap. Maybe not the same thing, but I've become so much more open with my own story, because I feel that people are like, I want to know you're real, and it's helped me heal even more so. So I totally get that, because it's where we are at our rawest. Is that word? How many W's are in that? Oh, it's when we're at our rawest space. Now I can't even say the word, that we truly are going to see the transformation. And I have to say, I'm proud of you for doing that. And in turn, I have to feel kind of proud for myself. We have to give ourselves credit for the allowing, the alignment, and the awareness, which I like to call the AAAs, because it's important that we are aware of where we are and where we've been, and acknowledge, there's another A, how we grow,
Absolutely.
People see that. They see the realness. So yay for you. Yay you. So that leads into, look, the theater podcast isn't the only one you got.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah, I know. And like, I'm sitting here going, oh my God, how many, we've been talking about this for 30 minutes. That's awesome. But from the theater podcast, where when we first started talking, that was the only one you had out. And then you created this dynasty and this space for the theater community who is producing podcasts. And so I would love for you to share with listeners about the Broadway Podcast Network.
Oh, well, slight correction is that before my own, I had been producing and still produce the Brave New Weed podcast.
Yes, we were going to touch on that too. We can go back and then forward.
Okay. So Brave New Weed was the first podcast that I ever produced. And when I mean, you know me, when I'm into something, like I just dive in, and that's part of my mental health. My mental health diagnosis of OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. For those who don't know, is basically you can't see the forest through the trees. When I focus on something, I have to know every detail. So I learned everything there was to know at the time about podcasting. And this author, Joe Dolce, wrote this amazing book about the medical and scientific benefits of the cannabis plant and everything that can come out of it from a holistic approach. And some of our most popular episodes we release bi-weekly, and we're almost up to 100 now, have been with medical doctors and these therapists who integrate cannabis into their treatment plans, and they see such amazing results. And I am all about, I mean, I'm not like the holistic, going out and like buying herbs and oils, and I'm not that. I know you're raising your hand right now. Like I'm still very scientifically minded of like, show me the evidence, show me the data. But as someone who kind of believes in the science behind this, there's science behind this holistic approach. And
absolutely.
And so I wanted to help promote this. My buddy, Matthew Hendershot, co-host of the podcast, he and Joe host and I produce it. And so Matthew and I were like, we got to make this into a podcast. This guy's great. And we're still working later, but so that was my first. So everybody go check out Brave New Weed. That's an amazing podcast. And then I did my own, and through my own podcast, that was how I met Broadway producer Dori Berenstein, who is now become one of my best friends. And she actually helped. She's part of the creative team that helped get Dirty Dancing going, like the movie Dirty Dancing from years ago. So it would not have happened without her. She told me a story once that it was like down to Patrick Swayze and some other guy for the lead, and it was like her influence that got Patrick Swayze hired. So she helped to make his career. But,
go Dori! Thank you to all the women out there that are like, hello.
So she worked in mergers and acquisitions at Morgan Stanley before that, and realized she hated that and left that life to do theater and producing. And that's when she got into all this stuff. And she's worked for Disney. And anyway, long story short, I met her through The Prom, so I was working with the show The Prom at the time, which she was the lead producer on, and so I interviewed her for my podcast. She was my first creative I had on. I said I want to have a director, and she was in her episode 12 or maybe 11 or 12 or 13, one of those first early ones. And I emailed her ahead of time, and I said, "Hey, if you could give me a little time after our interview, I have like an idea I want to talk to you about." And so we ended up just chatting forever. And I said, I would not have started this podcast had I known how many other podcasts are out there. I love Broadway. I love theater. I love technology. There's we need to merge the two. We need to get podcasting into the hands of mainstream theater lovers. And the new generation of kids now getting into theater. I mean, just look at the explosion of TikTok. It saved Beetlejuice.
Oh, is that so?
Oh, yeah. Because Beetlejuice box ticket sales were declining steadily, and this was end of 2018. And then Presley Ryan, who was the understudy for Lydia Dietz, went on a writer's role in the movie. She just started posting backstage antics of all the cast, like Alex Brightman and Leslie Kritzer and everybody, just having fun on TikTok, because she was like 16 or 17 at the time, maybe younger, actually 15. I don't know. She's still pretty young, and started posting these TikTok videos, and the cast, like everybody started making their own account. But now Presley Ryan, she just exploded on TikTok, and all the attention and they use the soundtrack, a lot of the songs from the Beetlejuice soundtrack in their videos and whatnot. And this online streams on Spotify of the cast albums just soared into the hundreds of millions, because all of a sudden everyone was hearing the music, which led to ticket sales, which led to revitalization, which led to this, which led to that, blah, 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 blah. And TikTok saved Beetlejuice.
So what we are saying is we all need a TikTok person to promote our work in order to get it out there, because it can either like push you up here or destroy you, as we've seen happening in just the political climate, what TikTok can do as well, right? Yeah. But to have a good TikTok advocate for your project is never a bad thing. So find yourself an 18 to 22-year-old or maybe even younger to like
TikTok's the first app, and I consider myself very technologically savvy. TikTok's the first thing that's come along where I've been like, I'm old now. I don't get it.
I know, right? Like I feel like that about, what's the other one? What's the other big one that, well, I mean, there was Vine for a while, and there was
Vine. I understood Vine. I just chose not to use it. Like TikTok, I literally, if you're like, Alan, go make a tick or a talk or whatever it is, right?
I don't even know. I don't even have it. Like as a college professor teaching media, I learned so much from my students, you know, and I feel like they have their finger on the pulse, and they have their finger on the pulse, being the pulse of whatever technology is. So because sometimes you have to learn from the other generation. That's just, they've been born, they are digital natives, you know. We're kind of like the in between of digital native, digital immigrant, and then our parents are kind of the digital immigrants. So I was
born analog and grew up digital. Like
I know, like
a very, very unique experience.
I had a flip phone in college, and I didn't touch a computer until I was in high school, and that was like C prompt, bloop, 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 bloop. Like I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
I missed the simplicity of DOS.
Well, that's the other thing I would love to talk about. Look, so you have the Broadway Podcast Network. I want to touch on some other stuff too. So you have the BPN, which is creating this hub for all of these theater and Broadway inspired podcasts, because there was nothing like that.
So you brought me back. So I'll finish my story real quick. So Dory went to Dory, and I was like, Dory, we got to start a network, because there, as she says, there's no there. Where do you go to find Broadway related podcast content? Theater and theater, Broadway adjacent, theater adjacent. And so now we just talked, and we were like, well, who's going to do it? I guess we will. And that was December 2018. And then January 2019, after Christmas, we were off and running. Soft launched at the end of the summer 2019, officially launched October 3rd. We're coming up on our year anniversary, October 3rd, 2019. And then now, as of August 2020, we have over 80 podcasts.
It's insane when I think about that, because I remember meeting you for the first time to talk about HIListically Speaking, and we met at where you work, and it was an idea, and it was just kind of coming to fruition, and you had the Brave New Weed, and you had the theater podcast, and you were talking about all these ideas, and I'm like, you were such a go-getter. That's your obsessive compulsiveness, which makes you an amazing producer, by the way. Like, I just know that I'm like, Alan, I don't understand this. And you're like, just let go of the reins and let me deal with it. Like, I mean, you've had some choice words for me as well, but I've learned, because I have a control thing, that you just like, you have to trust people that are in your tribe to take charge of certain things. And like, I know that's an area where you thrive. I know that, you know, if I have something to share with you and I don't figure it out, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to see if Alan figures this out. Or you'll just be like, just shut up and let me do it. Right?
I know.
So there's a good side to that obsessive compulsiveness, but you are like tunnel vision. You get stuff done, which says a lot for you.
OCD is not OCD. They're different.
Oh, I'm OCD.
Are you? Are you really?
There's parts of, maybe not. I mean, there's parts of me that I think have a bit of the obsessive compulsiveness. I think I've worked on it, which is the other thing. We have the ability, we can choose to choose and realize and be aware of what we have. I had like a worriness within the OCD. Like I was a compulsive worrier. And a lot of that stems from my dad's health being really poor, growing up with a dad who was sick, always being a worrier. So that it was not really like the OCD of like feeling like I have to constantly wash my hands. It was the obsessiveness of what I was thinking about, Yeah. And you have to work on
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So for you, it's a little
Yeah,
different.
it is different. And gosh, I know we're jumping around all over the place. Sorry, listeners, but this is how we are. Yeah. So
It's
the
typical.
OCPD of it all, it is, it's like I get fixated on tiny details. I don't have to
Mm,
like go into a room and turn the light on and off 3 times, or touch a doorknob and then go, whatever the typical. I
mhm,
don't know if there's any typical sort of OCD stuff. Actually, I don't know that much about OCD. OCPD
mhm.
is literally, I just get fixated on small details. I'm very detail oriented, and with the help of a little bit of fluoxetine and just some general meditation and mindfulness practices, I've been able just to be like, you know what, that little thing over there is out of place. It's okay. It's okay now.
Yep.
It's all right.
Yep.
Or that person at work said something slightly incorrect. I don't need to make a big deal out of correcting them. Not the end of the world. Totally fine. And it's helped my general attitude and my
Mhm.
relationships, because I'm just like, okay, I'm more like, just let things roll off my back.
Yes, and I totally get that, and it's a work in progress. We are works in
Always.
progress. Our listeners, we get it. We're all works in progress. It's part of the growth, and like I said earlier, the only way out is through, from learning, from growing. We don't know that we're dealing with it until we've had a chance to kind of witness it and realize, how can I live my life better? Right? Do I need to worry about these things? Because the only person you're really affecting and the only person it's really truly impacting first is
Hmm.
you, right? Somebody else might be like, that was weird, but they move on with their day, but you take it with you, you know?
And
So
I
you have
think
to
about
learn
it,
to like,
and I obsess over it,
yeah.
and
And is anybody
I
else?
replay it over and over. I'm like, okay, if that happens
Right.
again, I need to be prepared, and I need to act this way, and I need to say this instead. And like, I'm constantly, accounting for the multiverse in my head. It's so
Mhm.
irritating.
But it takes time, and I've seen just in the time I've known you, and we've reconnected on a much closer level, that I see how you react, because I know you and I'm a very strong personality, and you're like, Hill, just like just let me do it, and I'm like, okay. So you have like these two very strong personalities that have our own things that we're dealing with, but being able to dance together in a harmony is really important. Whether it's with me or me with you, or you with your wife or your kids or anyone or our colleagues, whoever it is, it's important for us to learn how to really dance and move well within our lives. Because if we don't, we're going to be like disappointed, So I have to say, I give you credit for that, because I've noticed how you react to things and the patience that you have, which I think I've mentioned to you before. I'm like, you have the ultimate amount of patience, which so thank you, because I know I'm a challenge. So that kind of leads into the next thing. It's the balance, and we talked about that. For our listeners, Alan, who is my producer of Holistically Speaking, an incredibly wonderful friend and talented person as well, you are not just a podcaster. You have a life outside of BPN, theater podcast, Brave New Weed. You have a
Yep.
family. You have a very highly profiled job at a very highly profiled company. And the balance, dude, like how?
It's hard. I will not lie. It is hard. And I work at Google, uh, as what one would call the day job. Um, so yes, the
I don't even know if it's that, because you're like, hey, I have a call with China, and it's like 10:30 at night. I'm like, okay. You're like, I'll be up till 1. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'll call you at 1,
yeah. Well,
So,
that's kind of the upside. I mean, if there is a silver lining of working from home forever in quarantine now, it's
yeah.
just that, I can take breaks now during the afternoon and go to my bed and take a nap, and then I come back and I have calls with China. But yeah, the balance is it's hard, and I give credit where credit is due. With two small kids, one that just turned 4 and another that's 5.5, I could not do this without my wife.
Mm.
She's there when I need her. And I'll be the first to admit, and my wife and I tell each other this, we're like, I'm a much better dad when I don't see my kids all the time. I need time away from them. And she needs time away from them. And we know that. And so like we will alternate and take the kids away. Like I'll take them out, just the two of them, or maybe we'll split them up because they're there. If they start fighting because they've been around each other long, we spread them out. But I mean, to answer your question, the balance, it's a lot of mindfulness. It's really like waking up in the morning, and I live and die by my schedule and my calendar. And if it's not on my calendar, I promise you I will forget it. And I look at my day and I'm like, okay, so I need to prep this. Again, this is the OCPD in me. And I say, okay, so by this time, I need to have this ready. So I work myself backwards. And okay, so I need to start this at this time, which means I need to get these other things done beforehand. And to be able to logistically plan out my day and accomplish all of that is so unbelievably and strangely rewarding. Like I get a lot of validation, self-validation out of saying, here's my ticks for the day, my check boxes, and just ticking them all off. And it's really fun. I thrive better. I thrive when there's a lot to do. If I don't have a lot to do, I don't get anything done. But I get tons to do when I get tons more done more efficiently when there's more waiting for me on the other side.
Oh my gosh, I so get that, and that's kind of going into the whole thing of where the podcasts that we do, sometimes we learn from the people that are on our podcast. Now, you and I have known each other for, 15 years or something. And just sitting here hearing you say that, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that, like, if I have nothing to do, I feel like the biggest failure. But if I have a gajillion things in my bullet journal and I'm able to highlight everything and check them off, I feel like, woohoo, success.
Yeah.
I totally get it. But sometimes it's also just letting go and realizing it's okay to not do.
And that is so hard for me. I back in the end of January through the end of April, January, February, March, I took a 3-month mental health leave from Google. And because I had been there for 7 years and I was burnt out really of just the expectations there were a lot, of course. It's Google. And fortunately, like I do not take this for granted. I just, I contacted HR and I was like, I need to take some time off. And they said, all right, let us know when you want to start. And no questions asked, just had to get, sign off from therapists. Right. And that was it. And the first thing I did, my first day off, was just sit on my couch and watch Netflix all day. And I felt such strange mix of being completely useless and almost, I was going to say euphoric, but that's not the right word. More just content, I guess.
Good.
It felt good. Well, at the end of the day, I was like, I still have stuff to do in my personal life now. Like now I got to go to IKEA and I want to go to Home Depot and I want to go grocery shopping. And now that I'm home, I can do this with the kids. And so I started going back into this thing, trying to fill the void. And then the practice while I was out was saying, nope, be present and look up and enjoy where I am right now in this moment.
It's so easy to lose track of that, isn't it? It's so easy to be out of the moment, especially when we live in a big city. That thought of just everything's moving a million miles an hour and everything's around us. And a lot of times we just lose sight of the now, and the wonder of it all. The wonder that exists from just being present is so easy to lose sight of. And I actually, in my Thrive Hive newsletter I put out today, it was all about the topic was, where's your wonder? Because, there was a movie that came out years ago, Under the Tuscan Sun, and the one with like Diane Lane and Lindsay Duncan. And the whole idea was like this divorcee who has writer's block. She moves to Tuscany. She's had a horrible breakup and she wasn't really appreciating that which was all around her, But there was a line in the movie that I don't think Fellini really said, Maestro Fellini, where one of the characters quotes him saying, you have to live spherically in many directions Never lose your childish enthusiasm and things will go your way. So we have to find the wonder in the moment, the childish enthusiasm. Bask in the glory of the butterfly on the leaf, or the purring of your cat, which she's doing very well right now, or like hearing your kids snore in the other room, or just like the wind through your hair. We tend to lose sight of the now, and then before we know it, it's gone. So find the childish enthusiasm and the wonder in the moment and be present. And I think that's where you and I are on the same page, like the importance of meditation, which doesn't necessarily have to mean you have to sit there and go, because it scares people sometimes when they think about meditation. I know even my clients are like, I don't know how to do that. It's like, it's just being present and breathing and being and witnessing yourself. It can really create a peacefulness within you within 5 minutes. I'd rather see people meditate 5 times a week for 20 minutes than, 2 times a week for 40. It's because you're creating a practice,
Well, chemically it alters your brain too. It
absolutely.
I mean, that's the science. That's a science that I care about. I'm like, why am I doing something if it doesn't help me?
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, havening is neuroscience, so I get it. You want to alter your thoughts, moods, and behavior, and like create those happy chemicals, and like just really, be kind to your mind. Like I always say, you have to be kind to your mind first. You can't, if you're not kind to your mind, nothing else falls into place. So balance is a big thing. I mean, when you're working in a job like you're doing and then being able to take time off, here's the thing that was kind of like a slap in the face. Though I remember when you told me you were taking the 3 months off, COVID hit after that. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought I was getting 3 months off to be at home when everybody else was going to work. And suddenly you're like, I kind of got robbed.
Yeah. I was 7 weeks into my. No, wait, was it? Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like 7 or 8 weeks in, and I had about 4.5 weeks left, and then quarantine hit. Kids were at home, wife was at home, and I'm like, well, I can't go anywhere. I was literally planning on like I wanted to go to like Big Sur and do this sort of meditation retreat, or I was looking at some sort of just like going out to the Caribbean and just like being. I've never traveled internationally by myself. I wanted to do that on this trip, and I was just about to do this, and I was going. I had a plane ticket bought. I was going out to Denver to see some people, see some friends, and so I've got my nice airline credit for that. That who knows when I'll get to use. But I did. I felt I got robbed, and I actually kind of went backwards for a little while because I was very sad and kind of overwhelmed with everything that was happening in the world. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what would you think the takeaway from that, the positive that you might have taken away from learning about that moment, not being able to go forward on something that you've been planning? What would be the positive takeaway?
Well, I guess as we were talking about earlier, it's just that I was proud of myself for being able to let go of it. It didn't make me angry. I was just like, you know what? I will be happy with what I've got. Like, I'm fortunate enough to not be cooped up. Like, I realize the privilege of my statement that I'm about to put out there, but I have a nice place in Brooklyn with a tiny backyard that the kids can run around in. So we're not cooped up in a 1 or 2 bedroom or studio apartment in Midtown, which I know a lot of people are, and they're leaving the city so quickly now. And so for me, I said, you know what, I'll just focus on what I can do right now. And, like I built this fiber optic wall behind me because why not?
I love that wall. Like, I know. I remember you putting it in and I'm like, what are you doing? And now I get it. Like when I look at it, I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. Hey, listeners, just in case you're wondering, Alan's got this pretty like kick-ass wall behind him that has like twinkling lights. It looks pretty killer. And I remember you're like, hey, let me get back to you. I'm putting in some fiber optics. And I'm thinking like phone line. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then boom, it's like you have this cool backdrop. So when are you coming over to my place to do that?
Order your kid on Amazon. Go to fiber optic.
I'm telling you, it's like give this man a task. It does not go undone. So that was your takeaway. That's a great takeaway. And plus, having the family and being able to spend time with them. But yeah, you take that time off thinking you're going to do these things and life's changed for everyone.
What I have to say I really do enjoy now is during the day at Google, I would, if I want to take a break, I just get up and walk around the office. I go to the micro kitchen, grab a snack, grab a drink, make a coffee, whatever it is. Yeah. And now in those times when I need to get up and move around, I go downstairs, and it's like every single time I go downstairs, the kids run up and jump on me and are happy to see me just as if they haven't seen me all day. Like I could go down, go up for 5 minutes, come back down again, and they're just as happy to see me 5 minutes later as if I had been gone for 3 weeks. Like they're at that age now where they crawl on me and they jump on me, and like I enjoy that moment, and because it will end. Obviously, I know that it's going to end. But
they're sweet boys too. I mean, you're getting a chance to really enjoy them while they're in that stage that a lot of dads or moms don't, because they're working, doing the grind somewhere else.
Yeah, we lucked out. We lucked out a lot that both my wife and I are able to work for companies that allow us to work full capacity remotely. Like it is very lucky, and I acknowledge that.
Great. That's a good takeaway. All right. So we're wrapping things up here. What I want to do real quick is a quick rapid fire with you, and then I'll have you share something.
I've listened to so many of these. I'm excited to do my own.
Oh, I know. And it's almost like being interviewed. You're like, oh, I've never been asked that question before, but I've asked it a million times and I'm stumped. So let's see how you fare with some of these. I don't think you're going to have a difficult time, but we'll do that. And then I'll give you some closing thoughts. Space for that. Okay. All right. Here we go. Rapid fire. Cannabis.
Brave New Weed.
Technology.
Google.
North Carolina.
You.
Balance.
The scale that's the court system scale. That's
okay.
I thought of literal balance.
Okay. Got some legal problems going on there.
No, I used to balance. Like, things weigh the same. A scale.
Yep. I got it. Good. Theater.
The Prom.
Those are some good ones. You were quick. Did you read my notes?
No, I have no idea. Notes.
All right. So on that note, I want to know if there is one thing that you can leave with, holistically speaking, listeners, with everything you've been through and everything you've built in your own life and what you're looking to create going forward. What would it be?
Take everything one day at a time. It sounds cliche, but it's really helpful. You can, have your tomorrow plan, have your next week plan, have your 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan, and work towards it. But you can only exist in the moment one day at a time, and every day will throw something unexpected at you. And be okay with it and adapt it and make it work for you.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Alan Seales, I love you dearly.
I love you.
I love you. You are a wonderful friend. You are a fabulous producer. There's so many things that I could call you that I'm not sure I'm allowed to on the podcast, but I'm just kidding. Thank you for being you. Thank you for believing in me and holistically speaking. It touches my heart and my heart in more ways than I could possibly say, because every day when I'm doing this, I think I have such good people in my life that believe in what I'm doing because they believe in the mission. So thank you for that.
You are welcome. And thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for texting me at 10 o'clock being like, where's my edit? Thank you for being so on top of everything. No, I really enjoy this whole journey. I love learning about things I don't know, and I know so little about like the holistic medicine and knew nothing about havening, and I'm learning about that. And through these conversations working with you, it's making me a better person. That's what I always want to do, one day at a time.
I agree with that sentiment, and I feel the same way. Thank you for making me a better person and expanding my heart and just my knowledge. I feel like we're like in a therapy session. Like, how am I going to close out this podcast?
Podcasting is therapy.
Yes. Thank you. I love you. To our listeners, I will be putting everything you need to know about Mr. Alan Seales, the theater podcast, the Broadway Podcast Network. A must. Check out Brave New Weed. Just be a part of the journey because there's so much to learn from everything that you're creating. And there's so much more in the future to come. You're listening to Holistically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo. Thank you for joining me on the journey. The show is produced by the man of the hour himself, my friend, Alan Seals, with music by Lipbone Redding. HIListically Speaking is available on all podcast platforms, and you can learn more about the show and yours truly at hilaryrusso.com. And let's connect even further. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Hilary Russo. And if you like what you hear, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You're why I'm here, and your thoughts matter to me. Until next time, be safe, be well, and don't forget to laugh.